Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear viewers. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. In this series we are studying the treatise of Ustaz Javed Ghamidi, which is called Meezan, and which is in fact his understanding of the contents of Islam. We have been studying one of the preambles to his book, which relates to fundamental principles, and these fundamental principles obviously relate to the sources of religion and at the same time the principles of understanding these sources. We had started to study the principles of understanding the Quran, and after that we will be studying the principles of determinants of the Sunnah and of course principles of understanding Hadith. But for the moment we have been discussing the principles of understanding Quran, and we have actually studied 4 principles, and we will now begin with the 5th principle. If you look at the slide before you, it actually gives you those 10 principles of understanding the Quran which Ustaz Ghamidi has enumerated. So we have already finished the first 4: appreciation of classical Arabic, eloquence of language, uniqueness of style, the final authority. Today we'll begin with the 5th principle, which means which is entitled as parallel verses and constructions. So what we have to understand here, dear viewers, is that the Quran presents its message in various ways and a variety of styles and different constructions, and it has become an unparalleled work among other works in explaining its own verses, which are set in a very concise diction and which are inimitable. And thus it introduces itself as kitabam mutashabihan, which means a book which is similar to one another, in which verses are similar to one another. And the Quranic verse actually says, Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith kitabam mutashabiham mathani. O people, God has revealed the best of discourses in the form of a book whose verses resemble one another and whose surahs occur in pairs. So it is this verdict of the Quran about itself that it is something that has been revealed in a way that various parts of the Quran, they are similar, they resemble one another, and in fact at times they also explain one another. At another instance, the Quran has said, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِيَذَّكَّرُوا, which means that we have presented this Quran in various styles so that they pay heed. And this word actually, the word tasrif, actually literally means to circulate and pass around, which means presenting the same thing in various ways and in diverse styles. And to this, the Quran itself is alluded to in this Quranic verse, which is the first verse of Surah Hud. It says, Kitabun uhkimat ayatuhu summa fussilat min ladun hakimin khabir. This is a book whose verses were first concise and then they were explained from who is wise and all-knowing. So again, we know that this is how the Quran has progressed. Its style initially was that the verses were concise, brief and succinct, and later on these concise verses which actually carry a world of meaning, they were elucidated. And this characteristic of the Quran is something which is very unique. And if we read the Quran, we will realize that the same topic appears in various surahs. A novice may regard this as mere repetition, but those who deliberate on the Quran know that it does not contain any repetition. It's not repetition at all. A topic which appears at other places also does not appear exactly in the same background and context. Apparently, a person might get this idea that maybe there is a lot of similarity. However, there is always a nuanced difference. And this, of course, makes that part stand out. And the variation itself depends on the place and placement of the topic and discussion. So in various surahs, wherever that topic would come, it would have some additional meaning to it. Although if you look at it at a perfunctory glance or a very apparent glance, it would seem as if it's mere repetition. At one place you'll find that maybe an aspect would be hidden, while at another instance it would be totally exposed and revealed. Similarly, viewers might think that the real direction of address may be unspecified in one place, but at another context it becomes specified. In fact, years of experience in delving through the Quran shows that a word that appears to be unclear or ambiguous at one place becomes absolutely crystal clear at another. The argument of some premise may not be understood at one instance. However, the same argument will be proffered in a more detailed way at another instance so that it becomes absolutely clear. And this style adopted by the Quran, the reason for that is to imprint and etch its message on the mind of the reader. It is to express gratitude to the Almighty that we actually fast in the month of Ramadan, on the month in which the Quran was revealed, and it is precisely for this reason that we also get the chance to read the Quran a lot in the month of Ramadan, and also at the same time we are able to reflect on it. The words of the Quran, of course, are something which carry a lot of effect and background, and unless we are able to understand this background, we might at times be misled. And this is a principle that has been actually alluded to by many scholars, and Ustaz Amiruddin Farahi has said that Al-Quran yufassiru ba'dahu ba'da, which means that one portion of the Quran at times explains the other portion. And we have to also understand that if we are able to show how the Quran takes a word, I mean, it's like showing us and delving deep into the language, that we will come to know that at times a very common word from the common spoken Arabic language is taken by the Quran, and then it incorporates loftier meanings in it than it is conventionally understood, than the conventionally understood meaning. And not only this, the variation in which it would be used, it would use this word, and the aura it would create for it would be enough to fully guide and satisfy a student of the Quran about its usage and other minute details, without making the students to resort to elaborate Arabic lexicons. And so it would be by virtue of reading the Quran at various instances in the same chapter at times that makes evident something that might be very precise at one instance. And some very common examples of this, of course, can be seen if you read the very first surah of the Quran, Surah Fatiha. Now, the very last verse of Surah Fatiha says, "An'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim." I mean, O God, guide us on the way of the people on whom you have shown favor, not of the way of those who have earned your wrath or have gone astray. So now, of course, this is a very concise and yet a very, very succinct statement of who these people are. But if you look at the Quran, at other instances, you will find that people who have earned the wrath of God are none other but the Jews of the times of the Prophet, who intentionally denied the prophecies, who tried to hide those prophecies and did not recognize the Prophet, someone they were expected to do so in the very first time. So the word wrath of God, or if you look at the Arabic ghazab or maghzub, this is a very common word that has been used for the Jews a lot in the Quran. So you see, in Surah Fatiha, it's rather precisely and concisely stated, but at other instances, it becomes very clear. Similarly, the word an'amta alayhim is, I mean, again, something that is not fully, it does not fully explain who the people are to whom God has shown favor. But at another instance, we are told in the Quran, فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. So these are the people, the favor that is shown to them is that they will be in the hereafter in the company of messengers and the righteous and the truthful and the witnesses. And similarly, if you look at the word dhalin in Surah Fatiha, the people who have gone astray, if we find its connotation in the Quran. At other instances, it will become very clear that the Christians or the Nazarenes of the times of the Prophet and the Quran are being referred to. So you see, Surah Fatiha is one very glaring example, the very first surah of the Quran, in which there are three insinuations, three references, but those references are then expanded upon later in the Quran. And this is precisely an example of how the Quran explains itself as we move along. So the best answer to some of the illusions and insinuations of the Quran is the Quran itself. We now come to the sixth principle, also a very important principle, and this principle can be framed as the final book on religion. So this final book of religion, what exactly does it mean? It means that the Quran is the last and final and not the first book of religion it represents. The history of this religion is that when God created human beings on this earth, the basic realities of religion were ingrained in them, in their nature actually. And then these realities were communicated to his ancestor, the first prophet of God, Adam himself. So human beings were communicated these three basic things regarding these basic truths. And these have been enumerated by Ustaz Ghamidi in these words. So the first thing is, firstly, he has a creator who created him. He alone is his Lord, and as a natural corollary to this, he alone should be worshipped by him. So the very first thing which is communicated or was communicated to Adam was the existence of God, something which is self-evident, whose signs are found in his own intuition, and this was also communicated to him through Adam. So not only is this a self-evident reality, but also something that has passed down from the very first human being, who is also a prophet. Secondly, it is said that he has been sent in this world to be tried and tested, and for this he has been given a clear awareness of good and evil. He has not only been given the freedom to exercise his will, he has also been given sovereignty on this earth. This trial of his will continue till his death. If he is successful in this trial, he will be given the kingdom of heaven, where he will be free from the regrets of the past and the fears of the future. So the second thing which is emphasized here, which has been transmitted from Adam, is that this world is not a place of reward and punishment. It's a world of trial, in which people are put to trial through various circumstances. وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ fitna, as the Quran says in another instance, that we try people through good and bad circumstances so that we can judge who is better among them. And this is something that has to be understood at the very outset, because by not understanding this very small fact, we cannot reconcile the mercy of God with the miseries that are found in this world. At the very first instance, one is not able to understand that if God is merciful, if He's loving, He's caring, then how come this is inconsistency with the fact that we have so many calamities and we have so many tragedies occurring on the face of the earth? So in very few but very clear words, it has been communicated from Adam, through Adam, to all of us, that this world is a place of trial, it's a place of test, and the ultimate result of this trial and test will be announced on the day of judgment, which also will be the day on which people will be consigned to their final places, either hell or heaven. Now look at the third thing that has been communicated through Adam, and that is that the Almighty at various times will keep sending His guidance according to man's needs. If he obeys this guidance, he will not go astray, and if he evades it, he will be eternally doomed in the hereafter. So the consequence of that trial is then communicated in this third point, that God Almighty is not going to leave him to himself as far as guidance is concerned. Yes, human beings have innate guidance. Human beings are given that guidance in a way that they can see a lot of things, but that still is not sufficient to find the ultimate way to God. So for that, the Almighty is going to continue to send a series of messengers to them, to these people, and guide them. And if human beings obey this guidance, they are not going to go astray. But obviously, if they do so, then they cannot blame anyone but themselves. The guidance has come in the form of various scriptures, in the form of various messengers, and the last of these messengers, of course, is Prophet Muhammad, after whom it was made sure that the scripture that he would bring, which is the Quran, would absolutely be preserved and protected, because that would then stand in place of all the prophets of God and messengers of God as the final guidance from God. So these are the 3 points which the Almighty has actually communicated to every human being through Adam. And we can see that He has fulfilled His promise and provided guidance to mankind by selecting people from among them, and through them delivered His guidance to all mankind. Now this guidance itself, as we have seen in another preamble to this book, is that it consists of 2 things, Al-Hikmah and Ash-Sharia. Al-Hikmah actually refers to faith, which means faith and precepts of ethics and morality. And the second component of religion is Ash-Sharia. Now, as far as Al-Hikmah is concerned, which encompasses faith and morality, it never changes. Faith and morality never changes. So Al-Hikmah never changes because it is constant. The manner it was revealed in the very first scripture is exactly the same as we can find in the Quran. However, as far as the Sharia is concerned, which is the second component of religion, it was revealed as per the needs of a people. People who are living in specific circumstances. We know that earlier on people were living as hunters and gatherers, and they were living under the economic principle of animal husbandry. They had livestock, and then of course they were cultivating fields. So we had different situations and civilizations in various phases. So the Sharia given to them, because it depends on the environment and the situation, it did change. But however, until the time of Abraham, it crystallized in the form of Sunnah, for all mankind. In the time of Moses, when a formal state of the Israelites had been established, the Torah was revealed. And the directives of the Sharia regarding the collectivity were also revealed. So initially, of course, we know that although Abraham was the prophet in whose era all these directives had crystallized, but the book was not revealed until, of course, the state was established, and this happened in the times of Moses. So during this time, when certain aspects of hikmah did not remain before the eyes of people, they were made evident through the Psalms and the Gospels, the Zabur and the Injil. So the Sharia was given, which is the Torah itself, in the times of Moses, but later on, as certain aspects of hikmah and morality were not fully evident, so the Almighty revealed the Psalms and the Gospels. And when the original text of these scriptures became extinct, the Almighty actually sent the last of His messengers and gave them the Quran. Now, this short history actually has been narrated in the Quran itself in very precise words, that how guidance was actually something that started off with the Torah, and then came the Zabur and the Gospels, and finally the Quran. So this is the verse that says very clearly how this guidance was brought to a completion. This is verse 48 of Surah number 5, which is Surah Ma'idah. It says, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَمُهَيْمِنًا عَلَيْهِ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُم بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ عَمَّا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. Then, O Prophet, we have revealed to you this book with the decisive truth and in confirmation of the book before it, and standing as a guardian over it, that you may give judgment among these people according to the guidance revealed by God, and do not yield to their whims by swerving from the truth revealed to you. And then it says, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ يَبْلُوَكُمْ فِيمَا آتَاكُمْ فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. We have ordained a Sharia, an assigned path. In fact, it's more accurately, it would be translated as, for each of you, لِكُلٍّ, for each of you we have ordained a Sharia, an assigned path. Had God pleased, He could have made of you one community, but He did not do this, so that He may test you by that which He has bestowed upon you. So, compete with each other in good deeds. To God shall you all return one day. Then He shall disclose upon you all your differences. So clearly we can see that how the scheme of the Almighty has been beautifully ingrained in this verse. It tells us how guidance began and how this history has been enshrined. So if we look at these details, we can say that there are three things which actually precede the Quran, But before I explain them, you can see that as far as this verse is concerned that we have just recited, that it tells us that the book, which is the Quran, has been revealed as the decisive truth in confirmation of the book before it, which is the Torah. It actually means that it is confirming the Torah and confirming it because it has come directly as something which corroborates or in fact is the true manifestation of the prophecies which are found regarding that book. So now coming to those three things which are actually, which we can say they precede the Quran. And the Quran is something that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But before that even happened, there are three things that preceded and they can be called three precepts of guidance. The first thing is innate guidance found in human nature. The second is the tradition of the religion of Abraham. And you can see this, that as far as the tradition is concerned, it is something that crystallized in the shape of various practices. And the third is scriptures of the prophets. So if you look at all these three things, you can clearly see that these three things, they precede the Quran. Innate guidance is something that every human being was given at the time of birth. The tradition of the religion of Abraham, of course, refers to certain practices, and this also were given to Prophet Abraham, and hence they precede the Quran. And then the scriptures of the prophets, obviously, they also are the earlier scriptures, the divine scriptures, which were revealed to various prophets. Now, as far as innate guidance is concerned, we can say that this actually relates to the basics of faith and morality. In the terminology of the Quran, a major portion of this is called Maruf and Munkar. Maruf and Munkar. The former refers to, Maruf actually refers to things which are regarded to be good by human nature, and Munkar actually refers to things which are regarded to be evil by human nature. Remember, it's not Muslim nature, it is human nature. And all human beings regard things to be good, and those things are called Maruf, and all human beings which regard certain things to be evil or bad, they are called Munkar. So the Quran does not give us a comprehensive list of these things because these are well known to us. And that is why it says that a person is innately aware of these and is able to fully distinguish the two on this basis. It only demands that a person accept Maruf and shun Munkar. So the Quranic verse in this regard is وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. True believers, both men and women, they too are friends to one another. Contrary to these hypocrites, they urge one another to what is good and forbid what is evil. So, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ, actually, this verse refers to the fact that these true believers are they are true friends to one another, and they urge one another to this righteous thing that we call Maruf, and they also try not to or stop people or proscribe things which are evil and bad and called Munkar. The second thing, remember, was the tradition of Abraham, and that is also called the Millat of Abraham, the Millat Ibrahimi by the Quran. And it actually encompasses the prayer, the fast, the Hajj, Zakat, and these are all practical directives, and they come under this title of Millat Ibrahim. So the addressees of the Quran, they were fully aware of them, and to a great extent practiced them the way they actually were. And we know that this is a very famous narrative that Abu Zar said that before he even met Prophet Muhammad, he would be diligently offering the prayer. So 3 years before meeting the Prophet Muhammad, he was already offering the prayer. We also know that the Friday prayer was something which was not unknown to the addressees of the Quran, and they would also offer the funeral prayer and would also fast in the very manner the Quran had told them to fast. Zakat too was known to them as a specific share in their wealth, the way it is known. And so regarding the worship rituals of Hajj and Umrah, every person knows that though the Quraysh had added some religious innovations to them, the rites of these worship rituals or the practices which they offered were virtually the same as they are today. In fact, it is evident from certain narratives that people were even aware of these innovations. So there is a narrative which is recorded by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim that the Hajj that was offered by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, before he was even made a prophet, he offered this Hajj without these innovations which the Quraysh had introduced. and thus we can see that he had actually offered the Hajj in exactly the same way as it was being offered in the times of Prophet Abraham. And exactly same is the case with the worship rituals of animal sacrifice, itikaf, and some practices like circumcision, which of course is something that was carried out. So all these things are the millet of Abraham. They are called the Abrahamic practices. They are called the Sunnah of Abraham. And these things are already known and specified, and the Arabs were aware of them as if they are age-old traditions transferred by one generation to another. There was no need, therefore, because of the fact that they were already there was no need for the Quran to give their details, because their details were fully known. The only thing that was required was to actually cleanse them, revive them, and if some thing had been forgotten from them, then that had to be also set right. So if the Quran asked them to pray and to fast and offer the Hajj and pay zakat, it did not need to actually divulge the details of these worship rituals, because they already knew them. The Quran never gave them the first directive about these worship rituals. It only, as I said, reformed and revived them and explained some of their aspects. So this tradition of the religion of Abraham, which in religious parlance or terminology is called Sunnah, is regarded by the Quran as the religion of God. And when it asks the Prophet to follow the religion of Abraham, it indeed asks him to follow the Sunnah as well. So remember, the Quran has actually asked us to follow the Sunnah of Abraham, and this can be seen in this verse. It says, Summa awhayna ilayka an ittabi' millata Ibrahima hanifa wa ma kana min al-mushrikeen. Then, for this very reason, we revealed to you to follow the ways of Abraham, who was fully devoted and was not among the polytheists. So you can clearly see that following the Sunnah has been something which the Quran itself has asked the Prophet and of course his followers. The third thing that we talked about, of course, are the previous scriptures. Now, these divine scriptures are present in the anthology that we call the Bible today. So in the form of the Torah, the Gospels and the Psalms. And their recipients have lost parts of them to posterity, and there are also parts that have been interpolated and they are not preserved in their original language. However, in spite of these blemishes, still a rich treasure of the Sharia and the Hikmah revealed by the Almighty is present in them in its vintage divine style. Now, students of the Quran know that it has been referred to them at various places and has made concise allusions to prophetic tales and mention in them, and has negated the interpolations of the Jews and the Christians, and also criticized the history presented in them. And the Quran actually has based its Itmam al-Hujjah, as the term we have all come to know, which means communicating the truth to the extent that nobody has an excuse to deny it. So the Quran has presented its Itmam al-Hujjah on these very scriptures. It says that whatever it is asking them to believe in is not something new. They already know this by virtue of their own scriptures. And it clearly declares that its fountainhead and origin is the same as that of these scriptures. So the Quran has the same origin as these scriptures, and that is what is also mentioned in the Quran. So you can see this verse. It says, نزل عليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل من قبل هدى للناس وأنزل الفرقان إن الذين كفروا بآيات الله لهم عذاب شديد والله عزيز ذو انتقام. After putting people through trials, he cannot become indifferent to their guidance. Hence, he has revealed to you the book with the truth in confirmation of the scriptures which preceded it. And before this, he had also revealed the Torah and the Gospel for the guidance of mankind. And now it is he who has revealed this Furqan. These are God's revelations, and those who deliberately deny God's revelations shall be sternly punished. And God is mighty and revengeful towards such people. So you can clearly see how the Quran itself has said that these books were prior to the Quran. And it is because of this background of the Quran that now we come to the principles that should be accepted in interpreting it. If we look at this whole scenario, that we have a background in which the Quran was revealed, in that background we have already been equipped with, human beings have in fact already been equipped with innate guidance. They have been given the millat of Ibrahim, the practices of Ibrahim or Abraham and his sunnah, and they also have at their back these scriptures that were revealed before the Quran. So there are certain things that have to be understood in this regard, and those certain things have now to be actually noted down. So firstly, the first thing, this religion of Islam stands completed with the awareness of good and evil which is found in human nature and which the Quran actually calls Ma'ruf and Munkar. This Ma'ruf and Munkar precede the directives and prohibitions of the Sharia which are prescribed in the Quran and are the foundations on which the latter stand. Any concept of the Sharia which is devoid of the good and evil found in human nature will definitely be defective and against the purport of the Quran. So we have to understand that at the base of this Sharia lies the innate concept of good and evil with which every human being is already equipped with. Secondly, the Sunnah is not after the Quran. It precedes it historically and chronologically. It shall necessarily be derived from the consensus and perpetual adherence of its adherents, the followers of the Prophet. And the details of its directives mentioned in the Quran shall also be ascertained from this very consensus and perpetual adherence. They shall not be derived from the Quran the way some of our contemporary scholars have done so. So these practices and the details of these practices shall be derived from the consensus and perpetual concurrence of the Ummah regarding those practices. Thirdly, in order to understand styles peculiar to divine literature or divine revelation, history of the Jews and the Nazarenes or the Christians, the accounts of the Israelite prophets, and the allusions of the Quran to other similar topics, as well as the details of facts it briefly refers to, in all such cases, the real source are the previous scriptures. They shall be regarded as the basis of debate and discussion. And thus the narratives which have been recorded in various exegeses of the Quran and which are mostly based on hearsay shall be disregarded. In this regard, the final source will be these scriptures themselves. These narratives cannot be a substitute to the light which ancient scriptures cast on these subjects and the way the words of the Quran accept these details or bring to surface the real facts about such aspects mentioned in them. So these narratives, if you look at them, you'll find them that they neither satisfy the intellect of the students of the Quran nor prove of any worth as an argument for the people of the book. So these are the three important points that have to be understood when we regard that the Quran is the final, not the first book of religion. Firstly, once again, if I briefly allude to this, or allude to these 3 points, that religion is something that has been built upon the foundation of the Ma'ruf and Munkar, which is already found in us, in every human being. Secondly, the Sunnah is the practice of Prophet Abraham that precedes the Quran, and the details of the Sunnah shall not be derived from the Quran, but from the Sunnah itself, which itself owes its a source to the perpetuation of the Muslim Ummah and concurrence over it. And finally, the way the Quran has presented its charge sheet against the Jews and the Christians is something for which we will look at these scriptures, not the narratives that are found in our books of exegesis, because the Quran repeatedly refers to them. So I now come to an end to today's session with this small reminder that we have covered 2 principles today. The first one was parallel verses and constructions, in which we have seen that how, if we want to understand the Quran, there are certain parts of the Quran that will be explained or that are explained by other parts of the Quran. So that is what we also call tasrif in the Quran. So tasrif means circulating the same thing which is found at one place at another place. And the Quran has also used the word kitabam mutashabihan, which means a book that resembles itself, which is similar to one another. So that is the first principle that we studied. And the second principle, of course, was that in order to understand the Quran, we must not think that it is the first book of religion. It is the last book of religion, and there are certain things which precede this book of religion, which of course we've just outlined. So if you have any questions regarding today's session, please raise them.
So generally it is said that the layman will be saying that there are repetition in the Quran, but it's not there. So I might be getting this in correctly that even
Mhm,
Quran is not saying the same thing, that when the things are mutashabiha, they are
mhm,
being repeated.
mhm.
And if it's
Right.
not the case, could you please give the example for my understanding that how a layman and a learned person differentiates
Hmm.
between the repetition in Quran is there or
Yes.
not?
Okay, I'll just give you one example from which it will become so evident that if we skip some minor details and don't pay attention to them, we might come to the conclusion that it is mere repetition of a certain incident that has been narrated. Now, a very famous incident in the Quran that has been repeated, I think maybe 9 or 10 times at various instances, is the incident or the event of the creation of this of human beings, in which uh, Adam, of course, was the person who was being created, and God had actually presented his plan before his creation to the angels and had asked them that, well, he's going to create a person would be his caliph, which actually means that someone who would be given authority and the freedom to choose, and so that he would like to test them. So this whole scheme was presented before Adam, and we know that then after his creation, the angels were asked to prostrate before Adam, and all of them did except Iblis. Now, I mean, this is a very short summary, but you'll find that this narrative or this incident is repeated in the Quran 7 or 8 times at various instances. Now, the question that has arisen in the minds of many people is that it says that it explicitly says on almost all occasions except one that the angels were asked to prostrate before Adam. Now, Iblis, of course, was not an angel, he was a jinn. So, the question that is asked by people is that why was Iblis actually taken into account or held accountable for not prostrating before Adam, because he was never asked to. It was everywhere in the Quran you'll find is qala rabbuka lil malaika. Remember when God said to the angels that usjudu, prostrate before Adam. So every instance in the Quran tells us that the Almighty is asking the angels, and Iblis, of course, was not an angel. There is just one aspect, in fact, one instance in the Quran, which is in Surah Araf. The way this story has been narrated in Surah Araf, you'll find a very small insertion in Surah Araf at the instance that this incident has been related. It says that Iblis, why did you not prostrate before Adam? Is amartuk, when I had asked you to. So this is the only place. At all other instances, you'll find something very similar being related, but at just one instance, the Quran explicitly says it was not just the angels, but also the jinn who were asked to prostrate. But that is not mentioned anywhere except at that one instance. And if you miss that instance, this question, as has been raised by many people, does become a valid question, that why at all was Iblis actually held accountable for something that he was never asked to do, because the Almighty had actually asked only the angels, and Iblis was not an angel. So this is one example, and I can, of course, give you several other examples. It's just a question of minutely reading things that have been repeated in the Quran. The word repetition actually shows that as if they are repeated. In fact, as I said, there are details that are added at various instances. And in fact, if you would like to know of a certain incident, and if it has been mentioned at various instances in the Quran, then the best way is to gather all those areas and all those verses and passages and then bring them together, and then you'll find a complete picture. And at every instance, you'll find that some detail has been added, though at times it is very minute, at times it's very subtle. It needs a very sharp eye to be detected. But yes, there is that addition. So that is what is being pointed out here.
And the initial parts of that mutashabiha and repetition is not the same thing.
You see, the word mutashabiha means similar. It doesn't mean repetition. When you say that this book is similar to one another, it doesn't mean it is exactly repeating itself. It just tells us that there are similar verses. And yes, you'll find there are similar verses in the Quran. In fact, this is one of the pitfalls that the Hufaz of the Quran go through. When they read the Quran in Taraweeh, oftentimes the mistake they make is because they find a similar verse also in their memory, which is in some other part of the Quran, but very similar and has very small variation. And when they read the Quran loudly, at times they jump to the other variation, and then the person behind the Hafiz has to correct them. this is precisely why, because similar portions of the Quran are at times so closely juxtaposed that unless you have a very sharp memory, you might get entangled with them. But as I said, if you read it more minutely, you'll find that this is not what we call as repetition, it is what we call as similarity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, recently Nordic countries were listed among world's least corrupt countries compared with the Gulf Muslim countries. Nordic countries are ruling their society with truth and justice using human innate nature. Humanity is able to survive with guidance of innate nature. So why does Prophet Muhammad or Quran, why are they necessary or required for humanity's guidance?
So you see, that's a very good and intelligent question, and we have discussed this in our earlier sessions as well, that a very large part of guidance consists of this innate guidance, and maybe 60 or 70% is something, it's a very large part in which you are able to find your way out. But then there are certain other areas in which we are at a standstill. It's like a dead end. One very prominent example is to how to relate to God. So this is where we just cannot go ahead, because we don't know how to relate to God in the form of worship. And if people are left to their own choice or their own freedom, either they'll end up doing nothing, connecting to God, or they'll become so fanatic or so involved that they will abandon this world and start worshipping the Almighty or connecting to Him by going in a jungle or a place where there's no one. So this has been the history of mankind as well. So one important way or one important area in which we human beings cannot guide our own selves is our relationship and connection with God. So how do we connect with God? Through the prayers, of course, or the fasting, or through the Hajj or charity. So all these things have been specified for us by God Himself, because we could not have discovered our worship relationship with the Almighty by our own selves. And if you look at history of mankind, time and again people have stumbled here. Either they have totally given up this connection or this worship area, or they have become so involved in it that they have forgotten everything else. So the Almighty at the very onset gave us this guidance that if you have to connect to Himself, to God, then this is how you should connect with God. And this is just one area. I can give other examples as well. So it is here that we stand deficient in our intellect.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Calling for more questions. If we do not have more, okay, just got a new question. This one says, can we say that Al-Khilafah refers to the Islamic State or the political entity that governs the Muslim community, while Jama'at Sultan refers to the political system or the authority that runs the state? This is not related to our topic. So,
to some extent you can, because the word Khalifa has been mentioned. Because of the fact that we've discussed this, that the Almighty is going to give certain powers to human beings. So I can take up this question if you want. So basically, you have to understand that the word Khilafah has been mentioned as a common word. If you look at the word Khilafah, it has not been mentioned the way we actually view it, as if mankind was God's substitute or maybe vicegerent of God. It is basically used as a collective system in which we are given this authority to govern. And the word Khalifa itself is not referring to, again, that vicegerency. It is actually referring to the fact that human beings have been created such that they have been given the freedom to exercise their will. So this is what Khalifa actually means. And Khilafah is another Arabic word. It's just a common Arabic word referring to the collective authority or the collective state.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Salman Aziz, please go ahead.
Sir, the word Musna is generally translated by other scholars as to be that the things are being repeated and not the question of the Quran having surah in pairs. So any particular reason to sir?
It is so difficult. How people came up with this. The Quran itself tells us that Masna means in pairs. So if you look at Surah Nisa, it says that you can marry women Masna wa Sulasa wa Ruba, in twos or threes or fours. So the word Masna itself means twos. It does not mean repetition. So masna is the singular of masani, and it means something which occurs in pairs. I mean, you can just look at any dictionary. Don't look up a tafsir. Look up a dictionary of this word. Find out masna. So masna means something which occurs in pairs, and it really beats me how they have actually inferred the meaning of repetition from the word masna.
Secondly, sir, I have seen the dictionary, and some people have said that masna has the root word of sana, that means being praised. So it might be related to that also.
No, actually, you see, the root word is never the cause of, or the reason that you understand a word from. That is just the essence of how words are given in the dictionary. You must always understand that it is basically the usage of a word which assigns the meaning to it, not the root meaning, but the actual usage of the word. And for every usage, you'll find how your dictionary actually gives that usage in the very first instance. So don't look for the root meaning, look for the usage. And usage in this regard, the word masna, it always refers to something which occurs in pairs, not because of the fact that it is repeated, or as is understood that it means something which occurs in repetition.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Omar Farooq, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
My question is regarding Maruf and Munkar. You said that Maruf and Munkar, they are both they are with all the humans, like that,
Right.
common thing
Correct.
in all humans. Yeah.
Correct.
So Maruf is easier to understand, but when we think about the Munkar, so there are different societies sees different thing as evil. Like I can mention sexual orientation of different societies, which we can, like eating habits. Mostly are these things where the societies differ too much. So how will you explain that?
So you see, when we talk about maruf and munkar, it actually refers to the basics of morality, negatively and positively, and they themselves have been described in the Quran when it says, "Inna Allah ya'murukum bil adl wa ihsan wa ita'i zil qurba." So these are the three positive marufs, and the three negative or the three munkars are wa yanha anil fahsha wal munkar wal baghi. So fahsha, of course, means acts which relate to lust and sexual deviation. And then it says munkar, which of course refers to the fact that you usurp the rights of other people. And baghi actually means rebellion. So these are the three main or basic negative morality features that are outlined in the Quran. And then there is another thing, that what we call as social morality or acquired morality. So the ones that you have pointed out actually refer to those regions. What the Quran says here is that basic morality and basic positive morality and negative morality is the same, and every human being is going to accede to it. Yes, there could be exceptions, because human beings, their own natures, they get perverted and they're distorted. So a person whose nature gets perverted, you cannot use him or her as an example. It's like having an exception to certain things. So exceptions don't make the rule. But if you look at these three areas, fahsha, munkar and baghi, you'll find that all humankind, barring those who have chosen to get themselves perverted, stands at the same page.
I mean, then it is correct to say that sometimes certain societies are perverted regarding certain things.
Yes, correct. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Salman Aziz, please go ahead.
Sir, regarding the same question about the musna, because what is the relation between musna and the coherence or the nazam of Quran? Could you please elaborate about that thing, sir? And if it is something so important that this Quran, I was a bit amazed that only one word was described about this revolutionary concept, which previously nobody has understood regarding the pair.
No, it's not just, there are other places as well. For example, in Surah Hijr, it is said, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَسَانِي. The masani is also used there. Kitabam mutashabim masani, it's also used here. So there are other instances as well. So you see, what has happened with our Muslim ummah is something that you have to diagnose laterally as well. And that is that on most occasions, when you see that a very common Arabic word has not been translated the way it should be, more often than not, it is because of either a hadith which has not been properly understood, or by some extraneous asar of a sahabi, that again has not been understood. You'll never find any such deviation in other cases. So mostly by not directly going to the Quran. So basically, whenever you see this anomaly, it is because that people have left the Quran directly, the direct understanding of the Quran, and have approached the Quran through extraneous means. And that is what has happened. Because you see, now once it was said that the Quran actually refers to Surah Fatiha, and Surah Fatiha is something which is often repeated in the Quran, in our prayer. So the meaning of Laqad Atainaka Sabam al-Masani became some verses that are often repeated. And of course, because of the fact that these verses are repeated in the prayer, so since the hadith says that Surah Fatiha is Sabam al-Masani, is Masani, so they ended up first of all making those 6 verses as 7, and then the word Masani to mean something which is repeated all the time, because we know that Surah Fatiha is repeated in our prayers. So mostly it has been this extraneous influence or extraneous way of understanding the Quran that accounts for this anomaly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have a very broad, indirectly related question to today's session. This one asks, science can neither confirm nor deny existence of God. So how do we believe in the unseen when rationality cannot grasp the unseen?
So the existence of God is not a topic that's related to science. Science is something that relates to human experience or to human experimentation, and this is more of something which relates to our own intuition. The Quran itself says that the existence of God is something which is innately found in our own selves. We find the concept of God in our own selves. It's just, and it has actually given this whole explanation that before even mankind was created, all our souls were called to the presence of God, and every soul was asked that, am I not your Lord? Alastu bi rabbikum? And all our souls, all the souls of humankind, I mean billions and trillions of them said, Bala, that you are. And then God said, okay, although this incident is something that you will never remember because its remembrance has been deleted from our minds, but when you are reminded of the fact that this universe has a creator by your own intuition, by the world around you, by the fact that everything has been created in the way that we find things to be created, because when you look at a table, we find that someone must have constructed it or made it. If you look at a cake, you must think that it has been baked by someone. It's not come into existence by its own self, etc., etc. So once this concept has been found in us, and once we are reminded about that creator through these extraneous or external signs, we immediately come to the conclusion that we have been made, we have a creator. And above all, we have a conscience. That conscience tells us about right and wrong, and this right and wrong concept must have a origin, and that origin is that right and wrong must be accounted for. And because it is not being accounted for in this world, then there has to be someone who's going to create another world in which this accountability is going to take place. So you see, this is more of philosophical reasoning that relates to the existence of the creator. You'll not go to science and find out this existence. I mean, this is not the topic of science. This is not the ambit of science, I would say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, are there any sunnah that we've been following through Adam alayhi salam?
Well, because of the fact that pre-Abrahamic practices are, they're like prehistoric. We don't have knowledge about them because it was only after Prophet Abraham that we can say that history was recorded in a way that we can have some idea about it. So we just cannot say about pre-Abrahamic time, but what we can say through the Quran is, and some other sources also, that for example the prayer, one of the five prayers that we offer, one of the worship rituals. So this is something that was taught to every single prophet of God by Gabriel, and this is once an answer that he gave to Prophet Muhammad, and he said that the way I'm teaching you these 5 times of the prayer are the ones that I taught to every single prophet before you. So these are like insinuations, and then within the Quran we also find that these rituals were instructed to other prophets, like for example the Prophet Shuaib, Jonah, of course, and other prophets also. So yes, we have this inclination, but going back exactly to Adam is something we cannot actually say for sure. But what you can say as an inference or as a derivation is that although it has not been mentioned, but there is no reason not to believe that there must have been all these worship rituals present as soon as the society took its shape.
So once Ramji Sahab said that the coherence in Quran was introduced to the West by probably Mustansar Mir Sahab in some PhD article. So are you familiar with that? And do you have any knowledge that what was the reaction of any guy from West about the coherence in Quran?
So this is a PhD thesis that he had written in 1983 in the University of Michigan in the US. It's now more than 40 years ago, and it was primarily something that was elaborated upon on the Tadabbur Quran of Amin Hassan Islahi, the concept of Nazm as envisaged by Ustaz Amin Hassan Islahi. And I think that from that time until today, people have been rather skeptical regarding the concept of Nazm, because one of the things that they often raise is that why is it that for the first time a scholar of the modern era has come to the conclusion the way that he has, and why is it, if it was something so very important and apparent, that the earliest scholars did not point it out. So in my own personal experience, I have seen that scholars are not very, I would say they are not very welcoming towards this idea. I mean, again, there are pockets of scholars, but the majority of them are not very welcoming to this idea, because they think it's something that has been recently discovered, and had it been something very important for the Quran, it should have been present right at the start, or the earliest of exegesis should have actually talked about it.
But the reaction of the scholars is somewhat predictable. I was asking that kindly, if you are familiar with that, what was the reaction of the Western scholars, the guy who...
That's what I'm saying. The Western scholars also had a very similar reaction. So they have yet, I have been in touch, I am still in touch with some of these scholars even today, and so they are still very skeptical, and they think that's rather like an overthinking.
Non-Muslims, his advisors, maybe the panel.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about non-Muslims specifically. So they think that it's basically an overthinking on the part of the Farai school, and dividing this Quran into 7 chapters, and each chapter is having pairs. It seems more of a, as you see, something artificial, or something that is derived as if you're forcing something to happen. So that is what my impression has been regarding these Western scholars about the thesis of the Farai school.
It's something strange that the Western neutral guys also are having not their mind that...
Yes, because you see, they are also not fully influenced. I mean, you see, you have to understand and give them that leverage as well, that the language of the Quran itself, the way it has been understood and presented by the Farai school, is head over heels above what they have, what most Western scholars would even dream of, because you see the structure and the form, the way Ustaz Farahi and his successors have explained, has a lot to do with a literary mind, with a literary mindset. And we don't find many scholars in the Western arena as well who have that literary mindset. That mindset itself has been shaped by our own exegetical tradition, which is more mathematical, which is more mechanical, and which is heavily reliant on hadith. I mean, you seldom find a Quranic scholar from the Muslim camp that actually has this ability to understand, or has exercised this ability. I mean, I'm sure many would be having the ability. They haven't exercised this ability to understand the Quran from the Quran. So you see, from the very start, this concept of understanding the Quran through hadith became so prominent and so potent, and it took such preponderance that the Quran never became a content or a corpus on which people should directly deliberate upon. It was always something that had to be understood from some extraneous means. And this has affected our Western academia as well, because you see, they are not going to do something new. They are just going to follow suit.
Sir, it must be then going in the favor of the contemporary scholars who are anti-coherence, that
Of
even the
course.
neutral guys in the West, non-Muslims,
Yes.
are not paying heed to the concept of coherence.
Yes,
So
it
it's
does
something
seem so.
quite strange. Sir.
It is strange, but maybe it's just a question of time as things move along and as things are being presented to them in various ways. I mean, I think that things would be very different 5 or 10 years from now, because you see the way Ustaz Islahi has explained the Nazm concept is slightly different from the way Ustaz Ghamidi has done. He has done much more elaborate work, and if things reach the Western scholars the way he has presented them, it might take some time, but I do think that it'll create some stir in them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was all the time that we had today for questions. Thanks to all the participants for coming through, and thank you for another wonderful session, Dr. Saleem.